Continuing in the middle of the chapter. Wow, you really have a way with girls, Jonah wisecracked. Chip shook his head. I don't understand. This doesn't fit the pattern at all. And now she's all mad at me just for asking. Really, I did a much better job with all the other calls. Or I had Catherine make them. So you just have Catherine call this Daniela back tonight and ask things the right way, Jonah said. You don't understand, Chip said. I want to know everything now. Chip slumped in the seat, staring at the cell phone as if it had betrayed him. He looked so miserable that Jonah felt obligated to cheer him up. Hey, Jonah said, jostling Chip's arm. You and Catherine have been hanging out together a lot. Do you still have a crush on her? It was strange how talking about Chip's liking Catherine had become the safe topic. I can't think about crushes and girls and all that right now, Chip mumbled. Not when I don't even know who I am. You're Chip Winston, Jonah said firmly. He felt like he was replaying the conversation he'd had with Catherine the night he'd gotten the second letter, except he was taking the Catherine role. Chip didn't answer right away. Jonah wondered if he'd even heard him. Then, so softly that Jonah had to lean in to hear him, Chip whispered, Can I tell you something? Even before I found out I was adopted, even before I knew Mom and Dad weren't really my parents, biological parents, I mean, I always felt like there was something wrong with me, something different. Like I wasn't who I was supposed to be. Like I never belonged. Not here, not back in Winnetka, not anywhere. Jonah leaned away and squinted at Chip in distress. Kids weren't supposed to say stuff like that to other kids. What if somebody else heard him? Jonah looked around. Marcus Gladstone was drumming his fingers on the seat in front of him. Owen Rogers was doing his homework, muttering, come on, multiply both sides by 12, carry the 4. Queen Jackson was telling Nyla Holcomb, that boy is just bad news. Jonah was pretty sure she was talking about him or Chip. Chip hadn't even looked up. He was still talking, his eyes trained on the seat back in front of him. And it seems like this whole adoption thing, maybe that's my answer. Maybe once I find out everything and get an explanation, then I'll know. Jonah shoved his shoulder against Chip's shoulder. Hey, he interrupted harshly, stop that. He tried to remember the argument Catherine had used on him. Weren't you paying attention in that guidance assembly the other day? All teenagers wonder who they are. It's part of growing up. Jonah couldn't believe he'd been forced to use such a goopy line. Now he was as embarrassed for himself as he was for Chip. He hoped no one else had heard him. I think this is different, Chip said quietly. He paused, as if to give Jonah a chance to say, I know what you mean, or to admit, you're totally right, I felt the same way. And not just since I turned 13. When Jonah didn't say anything, Chip went on, and don't you see, this is big. All these kids, and the FBI, and ghosts. But it doesn't make any sense, Jonah said. I was working on a theory, Chip said. He held up his cell phone until our friend Daniela messed everything up. So what was the theory? Before Chip could answer, the phone in his hand began to ring, blaring a Fall Out Boy tune. Quickly, Chip flipped it open and looked at the number. 734 area code. Is that? He raised the phone to his ear. Daniela? Who are you? Daniela was evidently shouting because this time Jonah didn't even have to lean close to hear every word. How did you know? Chip moved the phone away from his head, gave it a baffled look, then placed it back against his ear. What are you talking about? He asked. We are moving, Daniela screamed. Her voice blared from the phone. This is so awful. My life is over. I thought you said you weren't, Chip said cautiously. I didn't know. From the way her voice sounded, Jonah suspected that Daniela was about to cry. My dad made this big family announcement at breakfast. He's taking a job transfer, and that little getaway my parents were on was actually a house hunting trip. They're going to make an offer on house today. What are you, the realtor's kid? No, actually. Daniela didn't seem to hear him. That wasn't funny at all. If that's your idea of a prank, she fumed, or were you trying to talk me into thinking I was going to like the house? I won't. My parents say it's wonderful. She made wonderful sound like something evil. I bet it's a pit. Hold on, Jonah said, struggling to catch up with all of Daniela's fury by phone. Did she say her parents are making an offer on the house today? They don't own it already? Chimp squinted in puzzlement. You're talking about the house on Robin's Egg Lane, right? Chip said into the phone. He struggled to pull out the survivors list from his pocket, unfold it, and find the right number. 1873 Robin's Egg Lane in... He bit his lip, obviously making a guess. Liston, Ohio? Yes. That's what you asked me about. Mom and Dad saw it yesterday and just fell in love with it. She twisted the words bitterly so it sounded like they'd fallen into the deep, fiery pits of Hades. Jonah leaned in close and spoke into the phone. You say they just saw the house yesterday for the very first time? Yes, Daniela moaned. Yesterday for the first time. And just like that, they're going to try to buy it today. I think they're having a midlife crisis. They're insane. Why do they have to ruin my life? Now Jonah was certain she was crying. Her words kept dissolving into wails. I hate Ohio. I'm going to be miserable there. She sniffled. I can't talk anymore. I'm too upset. The next thing Jonah heard was a dial tone. Chip slowly lowered the phone from his ear. She'll call back, he said confidently. She didn't give me a chance to answer any of her questions. But she answered ours, Jonah said. Not that she let us ask much, Chip snorted. I still need to know if she's adopted, and if she got the same kind of letters we got, and if she knows what we all survived, and Chip seemed to be working from some sort of mental checklist. Chip, don't you get it? Those questions don't matter right now. Jonah eased the survivors list out of Chip's hand and held it up. I got this list 3 days ago with Daniela McCarthy's address on Robin's Egg Lane. Her parents didn't even see the house until yesterday. They haven't made an offer on it yet, but they're going to today. So, he shook the list in Chip's face. How did the FBI know the future? They couldn't have, Chip said. Seconds passed while both of them stared hard at the list. The 3-day-old list from the FBI that contained information no one should have been able to know until today. Jonah knew that they were almost at school, that the bus around them was filled with kids laughing and flirting and teasing and griping and even, here and there, singing. But Jonah couldn't focus on anything except the survivors list. That and Chip's voice saying slowly, unless what, Jonah asked. Unless they're the ones making her move. Chapter 16. That's ridiculous, Jonah said. Impossible. Why? Chip asked. Jonah barely stopped himself from giving an answer that would have sounded like his dad. Because the government is set up to serve the people, not to ruin kids' lives by making them move. Instead, he mumbled, why would they care where Daniela McCarthy lives? How could it matter to them? And to direct her family to that exact house? Maybe one of Daniela's parents is a top-secret scientist, Chip said, and some enemy is about to drop a bomb on their house, and so the FBI is moving them for their own safety. Jonah frowned at Chip and rolled his eyes. It's Daniela's name on the list, Jonah said, not her parents. Maybe that's just some sort of code, Chip argued. What about all the other 13-year-old kids on the list? Are all of our names some kind of code? Jonah asked. My parents aren't top-secret scientists, I can tell you that, and nobody's ever tried to make us move. Still, Jonah felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach at the thought of moving. He lived his whole life in the same house. Well, his whole life since he'd been adopted. My mom would never agree to leave our house, not even if the president himself begged her to, he said. She spent too much time babying the rhododendron bush in our backyard, and her roses and her grapevines and everything else. Jonah had never cared that much about the rhododendron bush. He'd always thought Mom made way too much of a fuss about those gorgeous blooms. And do you think they're a little smaller than usual? Should I test the soil acidity again? But now he pictured Mom clutching the trunk of the bush while some official-looking government types tried to pull her away, them arguing, but you have to go, while she countered, I'll never leave, never. The image was strangely comforting. Hey, Jonah looked up to see the bus driver in the aisle in front of them. He was glowering. "Let me explain something to you two," he growled. "I pull up to your bus stop, you get on the bus. I pull up to your school, you get off the bus. It's not that complicated." Jonah realized that they were at school now. He and Chip were the only kids still on the bus. "Oh, sorry," he said, jumping up, grabbing his backpack. "Maybe you want to go to the elementary school instead?" the bus driver asked. He seemed amused now. "That's my next run. This is the day when all the little kids stay on the bus extra long to learn bus safety. Maybe you need that, just to learn to get on and off." No, that's okay," Chip mumbled, scrambling up behind Jonah. The bus driver stepped back between two of the seats to let them past him in the aisle. He was laughing at them. "What a jerk," Jonah muttered as soon as they were put on the sidewalk. Other kids from other buses streamed past them into the school. He tried to blend into the crowd. At least no one else had been on the bus to hear the driver making fun of them. Chip grabbed Jonah's arm. "After school, I'm going to call Daniela back," Chip said. "Maybe she'll have calmed down by then. And I want to call the other kids on the list to ask why they moved. You'll help now, won't you? Remember what you promised? I'll do everything I can to help you." Chip's imitation of Jonah's voice was frighteningly accurate. "I didn't know what I was promising," Jonah wanted to argue. "That was last week. I thought I'd just have to quote from What to Tell Your Adopted and Foster Children, not solve mysteries, not see ghosts, not call strangers, not figure out the FBI, not worry about my own past." Chip's blue eyes were pleading and desperate. "Catherine's all right and everything, but she's too cheerful about all this," Chip said. "She thinks it's fun." "What's wrong with fun?" Jonah wanted to ask, but he knew exactly what Chip meant. "All right," Jonah said reluctantly, "after school." The day dragged. Jonah couldn't concentrate on any of his classes. More than once, his teachers noticed and said, "Jonah, are you with us?" Or, "Jonah, didn't you hear me the first 5 times I asked everyone to open their books?" On the bus ride home, Jonah made sure he and Chip didn't get too distracted. They were the first ones off the bus when it reached their stop. Catherine bounced up eagerly behind them. "How many names do you want to call today?" she asked. "I don't have gymnastics tonight, and I did all my homework in study center, so I'm ready to start dialing." Chip and Jonah exchanged glances. Well, see, I've got to get the mail first," Chip said weakly, "and then, no problem, I can wait," Catherine said, grinning. She followed the boys to the Winston's brick mailbox. Chip took his time about reaching in, drawing out the stacks of letters and magazines and junk mail. Jonah felt like telling him, "Look, if you think Catherine is going to get bored and leave, forget it. Once she's into something, she never gives up." Chip was so completely into his act, trying to get rid of Catherine, that he just stood there, staring at the stack of letters. Maybe it wasn't an act. "Chip," Jonah asked cautiously, "is something wrong?" Jonah remembered that lists and ghosts and the FBI weren't all they had to worry about. He remembered that letters had been the first signs of strangeness. "Chip," Jonah repeated. Chip held up a letter. "It's addressed to me, and there's no return address," he said, "but it's not like the others." He was right. This letter was in a smaller envelope, the kind used for invitations, and Chip's address wasn't typed, but written in firm, grown-up handwriting like a teacher's. "Open it," Catherine said excitedly. "Let's see what this one says." Jonah turned to glare at his sister. What was wrong with her? Wasn't she scared at all? How could she act so thrilled when he felt almost paralyzed with dread? Catherine missed his glare because she was snatching the envelope out of Chip's hand, ripping the letter open. "Whoa," she breathed. "What is it?" Jonah asked. He discovered he wasn't completely paralyzed. He could crane his neck and peer over Catherine's shoulder. The letter was on a piece of generic white paper. Unfolded, it said, "You contacted me at 8:35 p.m. on Monday, October 2nd. I was not at liberty to discuss anything with you over the phone. If you call back, I will deny that I sent this letter. I will refuse to tell you anything more. But if it is safe, I will meet you in Conference Room B at the Liston Public Library at 3 p.m. on Saturday, October 7. Then we can talk. Do not attempt to contact me otherwise. This is the only way. There was no signature.